Welcome back to RGR Football. This is going to be a fun one. It's our weekly check-in with Matt Dare from KC Sports Network and Chiefs Digest, a guy who gets to see things that you and I don't get to see. How are you, Matt?
I'm doing well, Ryan. How about yourself?
I'm keeping it together so far. There's questions and answers that I'd like to have, but that's the way my life goes. The big thing for me, we talked on Locked On Chiefs earlier this week, and you guys can see that video over on the new channel as well as all the normal podcast locations. But for me, like, one thing that I'm focused on, and I can't quantify it, and that's why it's got me kind of intrigued, and I keep coming back to it, and I want your take. Frank Clark wasn't out, but for me, it doesn't really matter. I don't think that Frank is a guy that has to have these reps in order to be productive. For me, it's more about what he does in camp, and I am really intrigued by the math addition, like 1 + 1 = 16, hopefully, with Jarran Reed coming onto this roster. How do you feel about what that interaction could produce, the two of them together again?
Yeah, I'm really intrigued because Andy Reid is really intrigued.
Right.
The fact that Andy Reid goes out of his way to acknowledge the addition of Jarran Reed as being a key for this defense, I don't think you can read too much into that because, Andy doesn't always go out of his way to make praise like that. And to basically unsolicited, really go out of his way to talk about Jarran Reed that way, I think is really intriguing. And I think it's important in two respects. I mean, one is that, I think that Reed and Clark playing off of each other can only be good for Frank Clark. I mean, it's somebody that he's really comfortable with. When you saw them as an inside-outside tandem in Seattle, they were really productive together. They've got a good relationship. That should be something that I think should help increase the productivity of Frank Clark. And setting aside even just how much that deepens that defensive tackle group that the Chiefs have. I mean, they've been really pleased with their defensive line depth over the last couple of seasons, but I think that just deepens that interior. But Reed hit on the key, which is that Jarran Reed allows you to now do things with Chris Jones all over the place. And I don't think there's any doubt whatsoever that you are going to see Chris Jones line up anywhere and everywhere. And I think that can only be a good thing for this pass rush. I mean, Chris Jones, let's face it, is the guy that every offense has to account for. And if you can't count on Chris Jones being in the same place every single time, that complicates things. I mean, that's the one guy that a quarterback has to make sure that he knows where he's coming from on every single passing down. And that, I mean, is going to give them tremendous, flexibility. And how much we end up seeing of Chris Jones on the defensive end spot is to be determined. But I'm going to say right now, I think it's going to be a lot.
Yeah. Okay. Because I kind of put the over under at about 20% of his total snaps. You think
I'm
it's well over that?
I'm hammering the over.
Really? Okay. So that brings me to that scenario then. If Chris is on the outside a lot more, like, are you thinking like 50%?
I don't know if you can do that. I mean, to me, Jones is just such a good interior rusher, and you don't want to take that away. So I don't know. I mean, 50 might be a little high, but I don't think that there's any doubt. I mean, you look at this roster, who is the second best edge rusher on this team? I don't think there's any doubt it's Chris Jones. I mean, and one could make even an argument that, given the productivity of Frank Clark, maybe Chris Jones is the best edge rusher on this team. But he's certainly in the conversation as one of the top two. I mean, there's a line. There's a clear line between those two guys and the rest of the team. So, and I think that's just once again, I mean, to me, it's also feeds into what are you doing on the interior? And, and once again, I mean, the Chiefs do have some flexibility in that they've got some guys that can move inside and outside, and you can do some different things with some guys in different spots. But I think they feel, better about their depth on the interior. I mean, if Derek Nottie is your number 3 guy that's playing a lot as your number 2 tackle because Jones is going on the outside, I think that's fine. I mean, and maybe that's even a better defensive line. I mean, Jones, Reed, Nottie, Clark is probably your best front four. Across the board. So if those guys, spend the majority of their time out together, I don't think that's a bad thing.
Well, and I would read it exactly the same way. That is their best lineup, in my opinion, right now. The interesting thing for me, though, and this is what it comes down to, is when you move Chris outside, is Reed enough to demand double teams? I don't know, because when I look at Seattle last year, he didn't get that much. I mean, he got a lot, not as much as Jones, but like there's going to be a fall off there. And so does that move that Chris is still looking at doubles a lot more without involving a sixth blocker, which I think that's what Spag's concept is. If they can get them to keep a tight end in at all times because Chris is out there and that's where they want to double, I think that helps the overall defense. But then it demands that Reed beats one, or then in pass rushing downs, maybe you make that swap for Noddy and Tershawn Wharton to come in and you get a little bit more pass rush out of that set. But for me, the focal point has to be Reed after that point.
Yeah, it does. And to me, I mean, that's a little bit of, why I think the flexibility of Jones being able to line up anywhere plays into it, because I mean, that means that, you're forcing that offensive line to communicate about who's got responsibility for Jones. And if he's on the edge, yeah, I mean, maybe that does mean that they're going to have to keep in a tight end to help out a little bit. But, I'm not even sure if a double team with, a tight end is necessarily enough to beat Chris Jones. And we know that Chris Jones one-on-one can win any matchup. Yeah. So, if you're just able to create situations where Jones gets mismatches because he gets one-on-one, because the offensive line's not accounting for him and doesn't know where he's coming from, I mean, that's what I think that they're hoping to do, is create just some mismatches by putting him in spots where the offense isn't expecting him. We'll see. But I mean, that as good as Jones is as an interior, right, there's a drop off. But I still think that that's their best four. And you're right. I mean, Tershawn Wharton's another piece that I don't think you can overlook too. I mean, that's adds to the depth of that defensive tackle group. That's why I think that they feel pretty good that they can once again go 9 or 10 deep on that defensive line and feel really good about themselves. But I think that Brendan Daly, I think, is really looking forward to the ways that he can use Chris Jones in different ways this year.
I am too, and I keep coming back to that. If you line Chris wide, I mean like 7 tech. I don't know about 9 because that's a long way for him to go. He's explosive, but he's not that fast. But if you can get that 6th blocker in there, now all of a sudden you're occupying 6 guys with your 4. Which I think helps not only the secondary, but particularly the linebacker group. Because if you've got Noddy and Reed in the middle, I feel like they can, pass rush well enough, mostly Reed, but they can knock down that run game more and protect Hitchens, who came in lighter. And I wonder if that's not part of the entire scheme, to use the bulk that they have, and like you said, their best front 4, in order to protect Hitch, let Willie flow a little bit more, and then see where Nick comes into the group.
Yeah, and Hitch coming in trimmed up, I think is really interesting, because I think that it's an acknowledgement on his part that at his age and experience in the league that he needs to do things a little bit differently, and he's coming in lighter, to allow himself to, to put words into it. I mean, to work easier this time of year. This is shorts football. I mean, this is 8-man football, basically, that you're playing 7-on-7 kind of thing. It's what you're doing most of the time. You're not hitting anybody. So what's he doing? I mean, he's chasing around fast guys. There's no reason why at 235, 240, he needs to be running around chasing guys at that size this time of year. It's only going to wear on that body. So I think he's acknowledging that he needs to play a little bit lighter this time of year, add that bulk on later in the process. Once they start hitting, that you would think was got to be a little bit easier on those knees, especially at his age, that it's going to keep him a little bit fresher. We'll see. I mean, I think that's his goal, is to be fresher for week 1 and therefore healthier during the season, because he has had those nagging issues the last few years. And if that's successful, then yeah, I mean, I think that's a big part of Hitchens trying to be a little bit freer this year.
Now, Hitch isn't a guy that looks like he carries weight easily. He looks like he's one of the players, and people don't realize this about the bulk of players, including offensive linemen. They weigh in weekly in order to maintain weight because it's difficult. I am a little bit concerned, and I hope that the intention is for him to put some pounds back on come camp or especially week 1. But if that doesn't happen, that leaves you a little bit out on an island, because Ben Neiman isn't heavy. We know Willie isn't. Nick's undersized to begin with, as well as being light. Dorian Daniels back there somewhere, but doesn't bring anything to the table. If Hitch is probably your bulkiest backer, you have to rely on those front 2 tackles to keep Derrick Henry off you, to keep Jacobs off of you. Like, there's enough that this, what I think is a push to try and manage the run game a little bit better. You put that a little bit at risk if you don't have at least somebody that can come on and take on a lineman and win.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because I think you make a legitimate point there that, really, I mean, Hitchens is the biggest guy of that group and is the guy that you're going to depend on the most. But I also think that, there's probably an undercurrent to, Hitchens maybe losing a little bit of the weight, is that even though he's not going to be as bulky, and I think he's probably going to still be closer to Anthony Hitchens' bulk by the time that the season rolls around.
Okay.
But, still, right now, I mean, the Chiefs look like they are foregoing maybe a little bit of bulk for guys who can tackle and actually make plays. Because, yeah, Nick Bolton's undersized, but you know what? Nick Bolton hits something, it goes down. And that's been a trouble with with that level of the defense has been the last few seasons, is that they've missed too many tackles. Guys been able to run through tackles. They don't have that punishing hitter. And maybe they still don't, but with the addition of Gay, with the addition of Bolton, I think that they're getting some guys that are going to be a little bit more sounder in technique and are more solid tacklers than they have had in past seasons.
Well, and I don't think they need somebody to bring the lumber. I know Nick did that in college. I don't know that he's going to do that against NFL competition. All I care about is he's in the spot that he's supposed to be in, because more important to me is we've seen a lot of breakdowns in terms of assignment from that level in years past. For me, that's what it all has to come back to. And if Hitch has less to do, or if he's less fatigued in order to do it, to get everybody lined up in the right spot and do your job, I think that helps the defense overall.
Yeah, and if Hitch is able to what I think he wants to accomplish, which is eliminate a little bit of the fat of his bulk and make it muscle that is more the bulk, then that's going to make him, I think, a more effective player. And I think that's what he's really trying to accomplish. We'll see. I mean, he's trying something different. And, and guys, when they try different techniques, it doesn't always work. But this one, it does seem like that he's really confident in the plan. As far as, trying to keep a little bit of that weight off this time of year so we can move a little bit more freely, and then slowly add the bulk back on, but add it on the right way and not just have it be mass, but actually be muscle.
Let me ask you this. If they decide to stay in a 2-back or 4-2, rather than going to the dime and bringing Dan down, who do you think plays the bulk of the snaps this season next to Hitch?
That's really intriguing. I mean, because I think that it would still be a bit of a mix. I mean, you're talking about not bringing, that's a good question. I'm fascinated on it because I am trying to play, in the Dan Sorensen mix and everything like that. But
sure,
if you're just talking about a true 2-linebacker look, I think that if by the end of the year, I think it will be Willie Gay that's doing that. And at the beginning of the season, it might still be Ben Niemann, but I think by the end of the year, I think it's going to be Willie Gay. And I wouldn't even be surprised if by the end of the year that Nick Bolton's getting more snaps than Niemann
in the true late passing rounds. Yeah, I expect that as well.
Because I think you're hoping that by the second half of the season and the final quarter of the season that, maybe even Bolton can be taking some snaps from Hitchens.
Yeah,
that you're comfortable with, that you can have Bolton and Gay on the field at the same time. I mean, right now I think the Chiefs will always want to have Hitchens or Niemann on the field at all times,
just to keep things straight.
Okay.
Yeah, my goal is by the bye week that coming out of that Bolton or Gay are taking the bulk of the linebacker 2 snaps. I don't care what the mix is between the two of them, to tell you the truth, because they both have things to learn. And I think being with Hitch, I think will help both of them. But you can see where the end of Hitch's reign in Kansas City is coming. And he's got to, I think this is smart for him, but I also think it's smart for the team to get as many reps as guys with him, not replacing him. Like what'd they do? I want to say it was like a 60-40 split last season.
Yeah.
Where Niemann was on the field without Hitch. And I think that was problematic as well. So that said, that's the front 4. Anything that I'm missing, or the front 7, I actually should say.
No, and I'm glad you brought up the mix between Hitchens and Niemann there, because I think that's, again, I think that's part of Hitchens' plan this year with his approach, is that he wants to play more than 60% of the snaps. And he just hasn't been able to do that because of the nagging injuries. And you know what? The nagging injuries might just be that playing with too much weight all season long and trying to manage that weight a little bit better. If that's successful and he's able to squeeze out more snaps, I think Chiefs are better. And if by the end of the season, Nick Bolton is able to take some of that bulk of the work from Ben Niemann, I think that they will be better. They're always going to be wanting one of those guys out there. And if by the end of the season, you can have Bolton and Gay on the field at the same time, that's a defense that I want to see.
Yeah, I think that's going to be profitable. Folks, ChiefsDigest.com is where you can find Matt's work. Over on KC Sports Network, get the newsletter and stuff, and then you can hear from him in the mornings. Like, I read it most of the time. I'm not a morning person, so you never know. But, Matt, thanks for the time today.
Thanks, Ryan. Always great talking to you, man.
Folks, thanks for watching Chiefs Kingdom. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks for watching this video from the team at RGR Football. Click these videos to see more and subscribe to RGR Football.